My name is Mary. I am 89 and a half years old. I never arrived. My parents came here, and they came in 1900. Well, I think times are really hard there, and they all want to experience Gold Mountain. That's what they had heard about, and everybody wanted to go to Gold Mountain, but it wasn't as gold as they found out when they came here.
Albert Lee. I'm 68 years old. I was born in 1952 here in Halifax, and my grandfather arrived here in 1903. He traveled by a steerage class, which is below on the bottom part of the deck, where you had, of course, like tourist class and first class above that. And people were crammed down below deck, which was the most common way the early Chinese immigrants arrived here in Canada, or North America for that matter. And they would prepare their own food down below there for the 3-week journey across the Pacific. What was also known in China as Gold Mountain, by the way, because the original Chinese that went to California went to work in the gold fields and mines, and some of them ended up like prospecting, but also too they were restricted there, where some of them were just more lucky and fortunate to work in the lumber camps and mining camps, being cooks, until like the railway came. And then there was the railway workers that were brought over to build the Canadian Railway that united Canada, which is also, by the way, the misnomer that the early Chinese settlers in this part of the country were not railway workers that migrated. There were some. After the railway was built, there were a lot of Chinese that couldn't find work and afford to go back to China. So there was a slow migration going east from the west coast. There were restrictions, basically legislated by unions, labor unrest on the west coast. So there was prejudice against the Chinese as a threat, taking jobs in natural resource industries such as mining, lumber industry, gold mines, as well as like other occupations. It was a threat that the Chinese labor was undercutting. And so there was a head tax which started at $50 for every Chinese entering Canada, which our grandfather paid when he came here. And then our father, when he arrived in 1916, was a head tax of $500. The head tax was later changed to the Exclusion Act from 1923 to 1947. And that prevented Chinese families to be united, where there was that threat of Chinese breeding and multiplying in North America.
I had one bad experience. This is terrible. I'm remembering all the bad things, and as if it's today. I had a very nice little girl, and she told me home. And the mother grabbed her in and shut the door on me. And I didn't know what was happening. And next day, I asked the little girl, and she said, I'm not allowed to play with you. And I didn't know why, and she said, because you're Chinese.
This photograph I had gotten from Mary Mohammed Ling, and it's a group photo on VJ Day, and it's a Chinese community here in Halifax at the time. I had a large 11 by 14 print made on display at the exhibition, and half a dozen people who I'd never known contacted the museum, who contacted me and wanted a copy of that photograph. And so when I met those people, they were half Acadian and half Chinese. And I said, what do you want with this photograph? Why do you want it? And they said, well, it's the only photograph of my father, because the sad, tragic story was because of the Exclusion Act. The Chinese men who owned and worked in the laundries and restaurants here in Halifax became friends of these Acadian women who lived downtown, who were customers at the laundries or the restaurants. And they eventually had children who were born. And when the Chinese wives, once the Chinese Exclusion Act was repealed in 1947, started arriving in Halifax, the Acadian wives and girlfriends who had these children were asked to leave. And the individuals, like there's got to be dozens out there, were taking these children back to their home villages elsewhere in the Maritimes. And only in a few rare cases did they become the second wives when the Chinese wives arrived. So these children grew up like not knowing or having met their fathers. So that was one of the most heartbreaking experiences I had.
So it wasn't as bad, but there was an odd time that there was discrimination. I'm very happy that the government had come across and treated us as equal, in that they took away the discrimination law like in 1923, where Chinese weren't allowed over, now we're allowed over. That's only since the war, by the way. After the war, when the Canadian government realized, hey, those little yellow men enlisted on their own. Like my brother, they enlisted on their own because they feel Canada's their country. Because we were born here. We are Chinese, don't get me wrong. We feel it, but we are also Canadian first.
My name is David Wong, or in Chinese would be Wong Dai Wei. I was born 1951. We actually came December of 1985. We arrived in PI. We arrived in Hawaii end of June of 1976. There was a lot of discrimination in the United States. The worst of it was that we were not white, we were not black. There was even worse. Nobody would protect us. We were not white, we were not black. Black people get protected by blacks. Of course, white people have their privilege. Now, mind you, there were a lot of good people, but there were a lot of discrimination. I don't think you would know of these things because they were never publicized. In the later part of 1985, there was a law in the United States that was passed that they have to get rid of all the foreign medical graduates. That means foreign doctors who are not already American citizens or have permanent residence. They have to get rid of them. They thought at that time that there were too many foreign doctors in the United States taking up American jobs. Okay, I don't know whether you feel that it sounds familiar, because now it's the same thing is happening.
I was just going to say that's what exactly is happening now.
In 1985, and there was Ronald Reagan years. Okay, he was a president. So the law was passed that all foreign graduates who were not already residents have to leave the United States. So what happened was that an immigration officer went to the administrator of Buffalo Children's Hospital and told them that they had to terminate my job that day. So my position was terminated that day, and I was informed by my division chief that we have to terminate. There's nothing we can do about it. It's from the government, federal government. We couldn't do anything. And they gave us 2 weeks to leave the United States. 2 weeks only.
In my days, we were the newcomers. Canadians are not used to a yellow face, black hair, small eyes, and they didn't know if we were a threat or how to take us. But luckily, we were fortunate because we had a very, very nice Protestant minister. He used to come to the house and he welcomed us to his home. My father would go with his dirty boots and coveralls, and he'll be so welcome. Genuine friendship. But when my kids, by the time my kids, that would be in the 60s or so, there wasn't as much. They found out that we are just like you and I.
My name is Li Qiaochuan. Yeah, I was born in 1931. When I came over in I think it was 1950, I believe. Even the Canadian people were very, very nice. Went to grade 8. I did not know too much English at the time. I did not understand what the teachers were talking about. So during class, I would sit in the corner, use my little dictionary, translate. One thing I think I like everybody to know is that Nova Scotians, Narragansons, they're very compassionate. You know, they help you, they help me anyway. Whenever I need to help. I remember there's one of my classmates. He came to my home and taught me English, to speak English, you know, how to pronounce this, that, and tell me the difference between the L and the R, which is really important. My teachers, one in junior high school, he would take us, me and a couple others, on Saturdays or Saturdays to his home. That's outside of teaching, to help us with some subjects. In high school, one teacher doing the same thing. Very dedicated people, trying to help students go along.
There were 3 days, 3 nights I could not sleep. What do we do? So we looked to Canada. I called every province except Quebec because we don't speak French. The only place that we actually got an invitation was PEI. When I called the Medical Society of Prince Edward Island, I was told that Summerside has been looking for a pediatrician for many years. They couldn't find one. So they gave me their phone number. So I called the Prince County Hospital in Summerside, and it was promising. They said that they would try to see whether they can find someone to go to Buffalo to interview us, because who would believe a professor in Buffalo, New York would want to come to Summerside to work? So they actually sent a family doctor to Buffalo to interview us. Then, because we couldn't leave the United States, if we left, we couldn't go back. So the only interview could only be in Buffalo. So we were interviewed at the airport, and what happened is that they actually had to get one of the senators in PEI to get a special work permit for us, so that we were able to leave United States as quickly. Within weeks, we got a work visa to come to PEI.
江宏民，1931年出生，1967年到我这个岛上来。第一个冬天就是圣诞节的时候放假了，我们开着车去美国，因为我的太太的工作在纽泽西，就是纽约再过去，所以去访问她。然后去的时候没有问题，回来的时候就不同了。在路上碰到大雪，那是12月31号除夕，我们想赶在最后一班船，那个11点开，所以从美国的那个纽泽西，差不多1000英里，我们在赶了，结果碰到了那个路面都有冰，他们叫做 black ice， 这车子就开始转，在马路上转。结果打转以后，还是车子就回到原来的要去的方向，回到这个对岸要坐船的地方，一看就是那个轮船刚刚离开了，而且车子里面的汽油已经快没有了，也不能回去，然后找地方找旅馆，然后待在那边，汽油就会用掉，我就开始担心了，我太太开始哭了。幸亏那边还有一条船，我知道那一条船是第二天早上6点半才会开的，我还是跑上去找那个船长。船长正要睡觉的时候，我正好找到他，我跟他讲我们的故事，结果他非常同情，他说：“你不要担心，我会送你们回去。送我们回去，你说现在？他说是现在。他叫我把车子开进轮船，那个船是会载火车、载车子都可以。他就在我们一部车子开过来、开回来，然后我们下去，他又开回去。
There's not the obvious discrimination like in the United States. Most people were welcoming. PI is home now, in the sense that there's no reason why we need to leave PI, even though I'm retired from pediatrics. This is the place that welcomed us, give us the opportunity to raise our children in a good place, where there is less conflict, we can say that, and that's where we can feel free.
My baby sister, 8 years younger than me, she became a nurse, and she married a UNTD, they call it, university as students. They exchange students from Belgium. So she married a Belgian. My oldest brother Tom married a Scottish lady from work, and my second brother Frank married a Norwegian lady, and then my William married half Chinese in Halifax. So we have a little United Nations in our family.
I have a certain amount of happiness about living here in Nova Scotia compared to elsewhere in the country now. Having had lived and worked in other places like Toronto and New York and traveling around the world, I find it's been a very nice place to come back to. I know the people, a lot of people know me. I find that I have a lot of space and freedom here to travel around. You're not too far away from the ocean. I enjoy photographing scenics by the water, and as well as countryside nature photography, and also too various new friends that I have here.
这里的那个环境、人情都非常好，他们的人民都很友善，所以我还是喜欢这个地方。
If I had a choice to come to Canada, I would.
I'm very happy to be a Canadian Chinese.
I love my country, Canada, as much as I love China. 我的祖国